All right, I'm here today with Matt Daniels, who is the coordinator of pitching sciences.
That is correct.
What is with the Giants? What is
Yes.
that? For those who don't know, what is that?
So basically, I'm one of the pitching coordinators. So I do help out with some logistics in terms of helping with pitchers, plans, and things like that. But I do it in a little bit of a different way. I have a little bit of a different niche. Basically, I help integrate any sort of sports science information with pitching analytics, serving more or less as a translator between departments to help us do what's best for the players.
So technology being high-speed cameras, right? Rapsodo stuff, and sports science, biomechanics reports. Like, what are some of the things that go into the technology that you're what are some of the tools that people use?
I mean, I think that, a lot of your standard pitch design stuff that's becoming of age now and becoming normal is definitely part of it. And, we definitely have, other initiatives that I can't be specific about, but, that they can be more in terms of just helping understand our athletes a little bit better and how they move and that sort of thing.
Yeah, makes sense. There's a lot that goes into it, obviously, how they move, what they're eating, what they're sleeping like, and all these different things that matter. But you're more so on the technical side of performance stuff, not necessarily the sleep or the nutrition type of thing, right?
Right. And, the strength coaches and the nutritionists and, they own those areas. And, sometimes, I might work with them on just getting context to how well an athlete does in those areas, because sometimes that can help with something I coach. Sometimes an athlete's problem is not on it's not necessarily on the skill side of things. It could be somewhere else. And sometimes if I have information from one of those areas that gives me the idea that I just need to be another person to help encourage their compliance in another area off the field, then, hopefully that it's good for the athlete, and it really shows the importance of how everything matters and not just throwing baseballs around.
Yeah, so you kind of have the high level, broad view of all the different things going on.
Right, and definitely I don't claim to know everything, but I do just try to help work with different departments to figure out the context of exactly what a pitcher needs, and then from there, it's working with the other coordinators, working with the coaches on making sure that message is conveyed in a uniform fashion.
Yeah. And so do you mostly work on the big league side, the minor league side, all of it? Where do you mostly integrate?
So basically, I'm a minor league pitching coordinator who specializes in those different areas. So you have some flex guys who are kind of your up and down major league, AAA guys who...
Right.
I've done some work with, but primarily it's in the minor leagues for sure.
Yeah. So how has this been with the coronavirus stuff? Because it got shut down basically right when minor league camp was about to start or had just started.
Yeah. So we had played one spring training game, one.
Yeah.
And then I take that back. We played one spring training game, and then if you remember, it rained for 4 days straight.
It's been crazy in Arizona this spring. There's just been...
Yeah, so it rained 4 days straight, and so we were kind of indoors, not able to play games, and then the coronavirus stuff happened where we got shut down. And I think the first thing is really just, when something like this happens, you just want to make sure that your players, your staff members, and your loved ones are all safe.
Yeah, of course.
First and foremost.
Yeah.
And, I hope everybody is doing well out there. And then secondly, it's just trying to figure out, where do you go from here? And I think most people from the outside looking in, they just kind of see you're either playing or you're not playing. So it might just look like, oh, it's just kind of the off season now. Those are literally the playing and not playing parts are the only similarities between the coronavirus case and the off season.
Yeah.
Realistically, they're totally different. And from the PD perspective, I'll explain why. So in PD, how it works is...
And PD, for those who don't know, player development.
Yes, sorry, player development.
Inside baseball talk here that we know, but you guys might not.
Right. Yeah. So as someone in player development, usually in January, you're starting to get ready for spring training, so your workload picks up a little bit. And in February, you might bring some of your starting pitchers into like a sort of mini camp to kind of get their volume and intensity going before games start, right? And you might bring your relievers in once like full spring training hits. But your hours during this time are, you're at the field, 10 to 12 hours a day, depending on the organization you're in, the tasks you have and that sort of stuff. And then from there, like once the season hits, the coaches are spending, 10 to 12 hours at the field. Rovers, coordinators like myself are traveling constantly. We're at the field when we're at an affiliate. When we're not, we're linking up with different coaches on communication for player plans and things like that. So, from mid-February through the end of August, you're just going constantly.
Yeah.
But at least like towards the end of the minor league season, you kind of see a light at the end of the tunnel a little bit. And so you're able to start slowing things down. Like I myself, I organize my own travel. So at a certain point when you're not traveling anymore, that's one less task, right? So like your tasks start like dwindling down a little bit. And then in September, you might have like some sort of instructs, every team does it differently, but that can last a couple weeks. But even during instructs, like your total volume of work goes down a little bit more. And then at some point, maybe you go to the DR, help with some sort of instructs there. Most teams organize that at the same time. And then finally you go into the off season. So it's like, you have like a certain amount of work and then it slowly ramps down before like you're into the off season and you have like a little bit of a breather. What happened here for the coronavirus stuff was totally different because you're at like this peak workload and then all of a sudden it just stops.
Yeah.
Like completely stops out of nowhere. It's a total cliff. And that is like really confusing because you go from having certain tasks you're supposed to do every day to just nothing.
It's so abrupt. Like there's no routine. You don't know when you're supposed to wake up. You're like, well, I have been waking up at 5 a.m. to go into the field, but I don't have to do anything tomorrow. So do I sleep in? Do I get up? I don't know what to do.
Right.
It's jarring.
Like, when do I eat? Like, when do I work out? Like, when do I talk to somebody? Like, who do I talk to? Like, like it's a sensitive situation. So like your first reaction is you want to like reach out to all the players and the coaches, but like, we don't know what every player is going through. We don't know what every coach is going through. They may know somebody who's, battling like this virus right now. And
so the first problem, I guess, is just the logistical problem, right? Like the players, it shuts down. And so then it's like, do we send the players home, like back to the off-season home, or do we keep them here, or do we just let them choose? So now you have this odd kind of scattering of just where is a player physically going to be, right? Which you never have because it's always, well, they show up to spring training, and then the season ends, and then they go home. And so there's this very natural, like, okay, we know their players live here, or we know but teams, like, they don't know spring training addresses, I'm sure. They don't know if a player chooses to go back to home or go to see his parents because his parents might be sick, or he wants to take care of them, or his, it's just, everyone just scattered.
And different countries have different rules, right? Like a lot of the Venezuelan kids can't go home. And so it's like, how do you manage those kids, when they're in town? And, not only that, but, towards the end of the season, you have like a lot of time to figure out, when guys want to fly to certain places to go home and all that sort of stuff. But this was like, okay, we gotta do it now.
Yeah.
And, hats off to, our people in the front office who really helped with getting those guys home at a last minute's notice, because that's not easy for sure.
Well, especially now that we've seen with people, airlines shutting down and states shutting down and not allowing travel and domestic travel like grinding to a halt. It's, if people aren't home with their families, they want to be home with their families, and these things happen just so quickly. It's been crazy.
And not only that too, like with the abruptness of how this happened, it's like, we were talking about how, do I sleep in? It's almost like you start to like question your self-worth a little bit.
Yeah.
And I've had people tell me like, oh, Matt, you're in PD, you still get paid, the players, for you, for instance, you guys are having a union negotiation with the league right now. It's like, fortunately for us, like, yeah, we get paid, and it's like, that's great. But at the same time, like, my self-worth isn't predicated on like collecting a paycheck.
Right.
Like, I want to like
work.
be of help. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's really tough. And I saw a tweet from Dan Heron, about a week ago where he said, like, hey, I admit it, I had to call my therapist. And he went into this explanation of how, like, when he stopped with baseball, he dealt with anxiety and depression. He questioned his self-worth and all that stuff. And, I don't know Dan at all. Like, I follow his Twitter account because he's very funny.
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
He's very funny. But that was a moment of him just being very real with everybody, saying like, hey, if you need help, then please do. And I think there's potentially coaches around the league who don't quite know what to do with their time. And, I would encourage anybody, if you're really struggling out there to really get the help that you need.
Yeah, that's not talked about enough in professional sports as a whole. The human problems of handling the lifestyle, the pressure, and all that stuff. And I had a segment actually on Bauer Hour on Sirius that talked all about just anxiety and what the life's like. What are some of the problems that you think that your players, and without getting into specifics on anyone in general, but what are some of the problems that the players are facing right now? We talked about the logistical part of where they're going to be, but I know one of the things for me is gyms are shut down, so it's like, where do I lift? I got two 60-pound dumbbells in my room, and I'm like, what do I do with these?
I know, it's amazing. I can't find a weight room. I'm just working out with one of my friends here, but this kind of goes back to like geography, right? And the time of year, because it's still March. Up north, it's still very cold.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of guys who normally they would work out indoors, and then all of a sudden they can't. Like growing up, if you didn't have a throwing partner, if I didn't have a throwing partner, you lived in Southern California, you could just go down the park, throw into a backstop.
Yeah,
I would do the same thing, being in Houston, Texas. And some of these kids can't do that. They may not have access to a mound. And certainly like if they have any sort of pitch design goals, right? Like they likely don't have access to like Rapsodo or anything like really technical. So like, what do you do? And it's kind of a weird trick because, even back to my driveline days, when you build a throwing program, like the first questions you ask a player is like, when does your season start?
Yep.
And when did it end?
Yep.
And in this case, we know neither of those answers.
We don't know anything. Like the season could start in 10 days or in 10 months.
Yeah, and nobody look into like what I'm saying too in depth, but it's like, for all we know, the season could start in July and end at the end of October. Like they could just add 2 months to the minor league season.
Who knows? Yeah.
We have no idea. So it's like, on one hand, we don't want, certainly pitchers in general, like don't want to just stop doing anything because like you don't know when they need to be ready. But at the same time, it's like you don't want to do too much because then you don't want the total workload to be like way too much if games get added. So it's like, what do you do? And it's just a very unique situation with unique problems that require unique solutions to really get us through this time.
So for the minor leaguers, they came off of the season that ends end of August, right? Basically.
Yeah, maybe like a couple of days into September.
Yeah, right.
And if
right
you have
on
playoffs, then mid-September, late September, possibly.
Okay. So let's even just say after September. So you have October, November, December, January, February, and now we're almost all the way through March. So that's 6 months since they've played any games, or besides one spring training game, right?
And two if like they were lucky.
Yeah. So they got 6 months, and now you have the potential of not starting for April, May, June. Even if it started July 1st, right? That's 9 months of, I don't know, of just off time, which you never get in pro ball. And at no point, you don't get it in high school, you don't get it in college, you don't get it in. I mean, perhaps guys from the DR, from Venezuela or whatever have, I don't know how it is. I've never been down there. I don't know what it's like down there. But this is just this weird time that no one has had this amount of off time in the vast, or whatever, in just the recent memory. So do you see it as being possible that's a good thing in a player development way? Because you would, I guess depending on how you utilize the time, right?
Yeah, and I think that's like the challenge that every organization faces, and each organization is going to deal with it in their own unique way. What's like really interesting is like, you had the off season, guys ramped up. Some of these starters ramped up to 3 innings or so.
Yeah.
And so I was like, all right, they were almost ready to go for a season. Now you got to tell them, all right, maintain some sort of ability to throw, but at the same time, like, we don't know what's going to happen. So like, don't, maybe not throw competitively either. Like who really knows? It's like, we're going to get our heads together and figure it out in our own way. But, is it a good thing or not? Who's to say? It's probably dependent on the pitcher, dependent on their health. Like there's just a lot of different things that you can take into account that it's a really tough call. I don't even know.
Some guys might need to work on getting stronger, right? That might be their main area of focus, right? So they can probably make some gains that they otherwise wouldn't have been able to make.
But then where do they go to make those gains?
Right? Yeah, exactly. Where do you
go? Maybe some of those guys, if you have a top 5 rounder who just like bought his own home gym or something, maybe it's not as much of an issue as like, some of your other guys where they need to go to a public gym because that's just what they have access to. And it's a weird thing where you have like this situation where even in the off season, I was able to work with guys that are complex.
Yeah.
Now I can't do that. Yeah, I can't do that. Like our complexes are closed, so I can't work with guys in person. And so there's some very unique limitations that we're facing. And at the end of the day, it's just, in my personal opinion, it's just about being there for the players when you need them, being there for the staff when, they need you. Because it's a problem that every team's facing right now.
Yeah, for sure. What about player health? Because one of the things that happens is guys come into spring training, and not in any specific organization, but just as a whole, guys will come into spring training having done 3 months of throwing and perfectly ready to go, or having done, some guys don't even throw a ball until they get to spring training. Right? And so now you have this spring training time where you do see higher injuries generally in spring training or the first month of the season. Then people kind of get through, and then you see some again on the back end. Now we don't know when the season's going to start. So preparation-wise, it could be something where it's like, oh, hey, here's 2 weeks and the season's going. And that's on the major league side. And then on the minor league side...
and you certainly hope that doesn't happen, right?
Right. But it could be a scenario. Let's say we get back into July and now you're looking at, well, we just got to get something going as soon as possible. Like, how's the player health going to be? Like, do you see that being a big concern with, especially because guys now can't do what they would normally do in the off season. So they have a certain routine or whatever that they normally go through that gets them ready, or they know how to handle that, right?
Right.
But now that's just completely thrown off.
It's definitely, I think, besides the virus, like player health in terms of their physical health is, definitely the number one concern. And, you just hope that, maybe they'll have enough guidance to where, they can control what they can control. And, in a sense, I don't like saying this, but maybe hope for the best. I think there's some opportunity for improvement in certain ways for, maybe some guys. But, you're right, with not knowing when the season's going to start, how long it's going to be, and, seeing volume and intensity for some of these guys peak too rapidly.
Yeah.
Talking about the injuries and things like that. It's a very real concern, and, every team's going to deal with it in their own unique way. But yeah, it's definitely something that, personally I'm, you definitely have concerns about it, but at the same time, you can't be totally overcome with those concerns either, because at the end of the day, like, the players, you gotta be sure that the players are ready when they need to be ready. And, at the end of the day, this is not a perfect world scenario. It's not gonna be a perfect world scenario. So no matter like what we try to do, nothing's going to be perfect. And so we just have to adapt the best we can.
Yeah. So college kids, they just had their season canceled, right? And so now they have, we're mid-March, so April, May, generally the draft is in June-ish, but we don't know if there's even going to be a draft or whatever the case is.
No idea.
Like, what should they be doing? Should they be... Because they just had gotten ready, or they were a couple weeks into their season. Is that something where they should continue trying to stay in season shape? Should they then pull back and be in development mode if they can? Like that's a really weird.
It's really weird because, especially for like your high round college arms, right? Like those are the aces of their respective college staff. So like, I mean, you went through it. Like you throw a ton of innings,
right?
And then usually after the draft, those guys maybe get shut down a little bit, or maybe they're on an innings limit, or
you throw 20 innings
whatever,
in pro
right?
ball or something, whatever.
And then maybe like some of your back half of the draft guys, or either maybe they're at a big school but they throw less innings, or even those guys could be like starters at maybe smaller schools or things like that. And I'm just generalizing. It's not the case for every pitcher out there,
right.
but now those guys are not going to be logging the same kind of innings. So like, how do you handle it? I mean, the first part is like, you're right. Like as of now, like we don't know what is going to happen with the draft, and I have no information on that, and neither does anybody that I know. So like,
I gotta imagine it's like the furthest thing from everybody's mind right now. Just trying to get the season started.
And so like, the college kids, like, I don't have a perfect answer for that, but at the same time, like, maybe if somebody feels like they have a really good shot of being picked up, maybe they prepare for like what would be their first professional season. And then you might have some guys where, they're kind of a bubble draft free agent sign guy where they might have to put more effort in at this time. Like those are just like the first things that come to my mind. But we've just never seen anything like this. And so, as someone who's employed by a team who's not in the scouting department, fortunately I'm not tasked with solving that problem. So it's just not something that I've thought too much about, but that's my initial reaction. But I mean, there's so much gray area that it's really hard to give any sort of like very spot on suggestion.
Yeah, mostly just trying to identify what the problems even are before we can even start to solve them, right? Like every time I talk about this subject, it just goes deeper, and someone will bring up a point like, man, I hadn't even thought that that's going to be a problem. Well, that leads to these other 2-3 things, and like, geez, this is a lot deeper than I even thought.
Well, and remember, the NCAA granted an extra year of eligibility, but some of these guys might be graduating school, so like it might mean they need to go get a master's transfer.
Are you going to have 2 freshman classes? The guys that just came in that were on scholarship as a freshman, and then schools are planning on a certain number of players on the back end leaving off a scholarship to give to the next freshman class. So now you're going to have 2 freshman classes.
Do you increase scholarships? Like, do you increase roster size? Like,
that's a big problem.
It's such a strange. I mean, first of all, I'm glad the NCAA did like extend an additional year of eligibility to like those seniors, right? Also, it's just going to be very interesting to see the after effects of like what happens from that.
Yeah. Speaking of Twitter accounts too, earlier we were talking about Twitter accounts, but Pitching Ninja and his flat ground app and hitting app and stuff like that, college kids utilize that a lot to get video of them out there and showcasing, I throw 90 with this movement or whatever the case is, right? Do you think that's going to become more prevalent this year specifically because you're not going to have 3-month or 4-month college season to evaluate guys? So it's going to be kind of showcase-y in a way? Like, do you see that becoming?
Yeah, it could. I mean, again, it's like really hard to say. Maybe there's gonna be college kids out there who organize like their own Sandlot games.
Dude, that'd be tight. Live at bats. Finally, let's get a league going.
Yeah, I mean, it could be something where Driveline Live at Bats is able to hold something. I really don't know, and just the fact that we don't know about like what the draft is or will be yet. It's just really hard to know that.
Yeah. Last thing I wanted to ask you, because I've known you since, how old were we when we met each other? 14?
We were late teenagers.
Yeah, something like that?
It was right after the College World Series.
Okay, so I must have been 19 or something.
Yeah, I was 18.
So it's been 10 years now.
Yeah.
And so I knew you from, we trained together first, right? And then you ended up working at Driveline even before I went up to Driveline, I think. Were you there before?
No, so what happened was, I remember this very clearly. So I was in summer ball between my junior and senior year of college, and at that point, you had met Kyle at some sort of seminar at the ranch,
yeah,
right?
the ranch, yeah.
And so I discovered Kyle independently on Twitter, and Kyle and I had a back and forth on something about like arm action or whatever, or glove arm or something. And I sent it to you, and I was like, all right, who's right? And you were like, Kyle's right. Like, that guy really knows his stuff. And so what's really funny about this is, like, at that time in our lives, and I think in yours particularly, it was like, you seemingly gave nobody credit ever for being smart. And so knowing this, I was like, okay, if Trevor's saying this guy is smart, he must be really smart.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how that happened. So then I trained up there over Christmas break.
Right.
Played my senior year, went back up there for a month, and then I went back to school to finish my degree. And around that time was when Kyle and Mike became business partners.
Yeah.
And so
then you ended up becoming one of the first employees at Driveline, one of the kind of first couple guys there, right?
So officially, you know, Ben Brewster was an intern there. I ended up being the first full-time employee once I moved up there. And I was trying to train myself to play professionally and also, like, you know, work the gym floor to make ends meet. Of course, trying to play professionally was kind of fighting a losing battle, but you know, I recognized the opportunity and, you know, that Driveline really had in front of it, and so I chose ultimately to stick to that and learning how to make other players better.
And so then you go from there into pro ball, having not had experience in pro ball, right? You know, hadn't played pro ball. You've had this vision of what pro ball is, I'm sure, in your head, growing up as a kid and watching the product, and then working at Driveline and understanding some of the inner player development type stuff, running the gym floor. What has been eye-opening to you about your time now working in pro ball? Like, what stands out that surprised you in any way?
I think like the team camaraderie perspective. And at Driveline, we did some work with the Dodgers in 16. I spent quite a bit of time with the Rangers in 18. I spent probably a month in Arizona during that time. So I got to see the insides and a little bit about how it works, but one of my favorite things about pro ball is just like everyone's like kind of pulling on the same rope to, like, ultimately you're trying to like develop players to win a championship, right? And I didn't realize, like, when you're not a consultant and when you're like on the inside, how rewarding that really is. It's a really good feeling to be able to like integrate with different departments and to be able to pull on the same rope to help players get better ultimately. Yeah,
that makes sense. The team camaraderie is the thing that I know I'll miss the most when I'm done playing. You know, showing up in the clubhouse and joking around with this guy, and, you know,
it's probably like a large reason, you know, and joking. I think there's been multiple commercials that have joked about Brett Favre like retiring and then unretiring, and, you know, not even picking on Brett Favre, but it's just like that's a big reason why you see players retire, like Marshawn Lynch too. Like players retire and then they want to come back and then they retire. There's just something to be said for like being with your brothers and going out there and having a bunch of fun.
So you find that on the front office and the player development side too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because you're with everybody every day, and
and, you know, integrating with the front office, different departments in PD, you know, working with the players. It's really rewarding to like work with other people to like make improvements happen.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, that's all I got for you today. Thanks for joining me. It's been eye-opening.
Thanks for having me.
Trying to figure out all the different problems that the coronavirus is presenting for the baseball industry. And obviously, you know, talking about this stuff, it's not to minimize the problems that other people are facing in health and stuff like that. It's just trying to offer you as fans some insight into the industry that you may not otherwise get. So thanks for tuning in. I'll see you guys in the next video. If you can leave me a like, a subscribe, comment, let me know what you want to see next. I'd appreciate it. Be safe, be healthy. See you next time.